This episode of ToC Presents Get to Know is sponsored by Manhattan, technology that moves life and commerce forward. They connect over 2 billion people to over 20 billion consumer choices. They are leaders in supply chain commerce. Manhattan. Hello, I'm Mark Lawson, Director of Technology for Technologists of Color. We've got a great guest today. They're going to be telling us about their journey into the technology field.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Cedric Smith. I am a senior design lead at Manhattan Associates. I've been with the company for 24 and a half years. Started off in research and development and then moved into customer support. Mainly, I work on projects and upgrades for our warehouse management solution. And I'm glad to be here today.
And we're very happy to have you.
Sure.
So if you could, kind of give us a background on what led you here.
Okay. So background, I'm originally from New York, from Long Island, New York, a small town called Roosevelt, it's 1 square mile. And not much in that town other than good people. At the time, there's been some development since I left, but at the time we didn't even have a McDonald's or anything like that. It was a really small town. And must have been maybe about 8 or 9. And my sister's friend had a little brother, and he owned a Texas Instrument TRS-80 color computer too. And I went to visit one day, and he was showing me this program he was working on, some game he was creating. And when he was finished with the coding part of it, I was fascinated because I was really into video games at the time, but to see someone actually create something and have the control over what the game was going to do just blew my mind. And I knew at that moment I had to figure out how to do this. And so growing up, my family is originally from Jamaica. I was the first one born here in the U.S. And let's just say resources weren't necessarily abundant growing up. We were never did without, but we didn't have an excess. And that's, of course, computers were pretty expensive at that time. But I kind of just kept wearing on my dad saying, this is the only thing I want. If it's a birthday, Christmas, whatever, I only want this one thing, this computer. And it just so happened that Radio Shack was kind of like a store that he went to often. So it was not a foreign thing for him to be in that store. So if he was going to get something for me from the store that he was already going to, it was an extra advantage for me. And so that Christmas came, and I under the tree was a trash 80. And I started coding from there. I just learned how to program in BASIC, and then just kept learning and learning. I always loved to learn, and I would just read as much as I could about it. We didn't have internet per se, so I would spend time in the library just trying to learn different things about computers. But then when I got to high school, I didn't think I wanted to have a career in it. It was more of a hobby, things with just playing around with friends in the neighborhood. But then I had a professor at a mechanical engineering class, and my professor, Mr. Stillman, he would use the computer to solve complex equations that we were using to test different stress limits and things of different materials. And when I was doing my calculations by hand, and then he would do it in the computer and have the answer so much quicker than me, I was, again, fascinated. Like, how could you do this that quickly when it takes me so much time? He's like, well, I wrote a program to do it. And so it's like, oh, okay, so there's much more to computers than just games. And so from then, I kind of got into it. I didn't necessarily think I was going to major in it. And my dad said to me, what do you want to do in college? And I told him, I was like, maybe psychology or something. I like to help people. He's like, well, what are you going to do with that? I was like, oh, no, maybe teach or something. He's like, whatever you do something where when you're finished with your degree in education, you don't have to beg for a job. You want people to be looking for you and the demands for your services, for things that you can offer. And I said, well, I really like computers, and it's a hot thing. So I switched and decided to go into major in computers. I started off at the University of Tampa, and I loved the school there. It was great, but I didn't care for life outside of school. Coming from New York, where everything is open all the time, and then going to Tampa, where things were closing at 5 and 6 p.m. And it was a little bit of a challenge. And then being that far away from home in Florida, from New York, was a little bit of a challenge. But I had a good friend of mine who was a year behind me in school, and he was going to Morehouse. And we were talking that winter break when I was home for the holidays. And I said, okay, if you get in, then I'll transfer, and then we can roommate. And he got in, And the next year I transferred and ended up getting my computer science degree from Morehouse. The thing that people always find fascinating about me getting a degree from Morehouse, though, was that I didn't own a computer the whole time I was a student.
Really?
Yeah, I
Really?
was a computer
Okay.
science major with no computer,
Okay.
but I had work study. And so I worked in the computer labs. And so that was what allowed me to actually complete the degree without owning a computer. And then I had a roommate my senior year when it was really apparent that I had to do things outside of the lab because I was working there. I couldn't necessarily always do my work while I was working. But one of my roommates in college named John, he had a computer and he would have to work after school. And so that period of time between while he was at work after classes, I was able to use his computer to do my assignments. And then when he got home, I would just have to get off the computer and it's his again because he had to do his assignments as well because he was also a computer science major. And we're still good friends to this day. I actually spoke with him yesterday. We communicated. Um, but yeah, it's challenging to um, I guess the main thing is it doesn't matter if you have it or not, right? If you really want to do something, do it. Put forth the effort to do it. And that's been kind of like my the thing that I keep in mind all the time. Things can be difficult, sure, but if you have the right support, and I've always had excellent support around me. I have family and friends who believed in me, even if I didn't believe myself, they would encourage me and always want me to do the things that are correct. Um, there was some times in the past, maybe some influences may not have been as, I don't know the proper word to say in this PC world.
Constructive?
Constructive, yeah, that's a good word.
Yeah.
They were not the most constructive people, and
Yeah.
I didn't tend to really gravitate toward them, but occasionally I would find myself with them,
Mm-hmm.
and then the other people would be like, "You sure you want to hang with them? You sure, aren't you supposed to be doing these things instead?" And I was like, "Yeah, you know what? You're right. Let me get back on track." And it was a great experience being at Morehouse, and probably the most profound thing in all of my years at Morehouse, the 4 years I was there,
Mm-hmm.
I was really blessed to become to join an organization, a rites of passage organization called Ndugu and Nzinga. Ndugu for the men and Nzinga for the women. And in this rites of passage, we practice principles, and these principles are what we use to guide our lives in every day. And we teach them to it's a let's say to grow people up, like with good character, from boys to men, from girls to women, and just to know that in everything that you do, you matter, you're important. It's vital that we have everyone's voice. You get a chance to we do different practices that allow us to grow and to share with people knowledge as well as our time and resources and things to make sure that people can live the best lives possible while we're here. And as a result of that, that process that I went through, it's similar in some ways to how people go through the Greek organizations. It's similar in some fashions. But one of the best things that happened to me, so in that is really odd. I had this assignment where for a certain period of time, I couldn't cut my hair. So right now you see it shaved, and that's usually not the way things are. Usually a full beard and a lot of hair and everything. But at that time, it was my senior year, and doing interviews with different companies, trying to get internships, trying to get jobs and things. And we had a career fair, and Goldman Sachs came to Morehouse. They were recruiting heavily at Morehouse at the time anyway, but I never really knew anything about them. I didn't know much about stock market, that kind of thing. But one of my advisors and my professors was saying, you should just check it out and see what they have. So I went and I interviewed with them, but of course, Wall Street is kind of like the suit and tie and the stereotype and the clean shave and everything. And here I come, this guy looking like one of the administrators used to say, I look like a refugee that just got off a boat. I was like, well, I mean, it's not gonna be like this forever. It's just this period of time while I'm going through this this journey for rites of passage. But she would, just tease me, lovingly teasing me though. But on the surface, that's not what Wall Street's looking for. But what they really were impressed with, and what really got them and I guess, kind of influenced them to take a chance on me was not just that my grades were good, is that the character that I was explaining to them about the journey that I went through, the rites of passage process, and those things that we felt were important. The principles are things that Goldman Sachs held in high regard, and things that they were looking for in young people to join the organization. And I got the offer there from them, and went to work on Wall Street for a year, and that was quite an experience. My first,
Really? Okay.
yeah, my first work experience was in training. We had to write a stock trading system as a group of people, 5 of us in the group. But it was a quick introduction to not to being to depending on people to work in groups, that kind of thing, in a work setting, but also be aware that not everybody that you work with is necessarily rooting for you, and not everybody really has your best interests at heart. And there are times when and as a person, I had to just rely on myself and make sure that the project was completed excellently, even if the other people on my team did not give excellence. I would do my excellence, and not in a sense that I'm doing it without them, but I would do it as a way to show them, hey, this is the way we're supposed to be doing things. Right? If you want to stay at this company and continue to work here, we have to deliver with excellence. And some of the people that I was in training with were taking kind of too many breaks, and not necessarily seeing how serious this was. They were thinking this is just training. How serious can it be? So it was a part of the project. I was working on the back end of the application, and so I had to learn a completely new programming language. And at this point, I did have a computer, but it wasn't the most powerful computer, but it was enough for me to practice on. So I would end up working late nights at the office. And it was about an hour commute each way for me from home on Long Island to Wall Street. And when maybe I guess it was 2 days before the project we were supposed to present, the front end of the project didn't work. and some of my teammates were starting to panic. They were, how can we get by and cover it up and make it look like it's okay? It's like, we're not going to get by. We can't fool these people. Like, we're the new people. How are we going to fool these experienced people who this is what they do for a living? Right? And that's just not the way to go about things. If we're not going to be able to complete it properly, at least communicate that to them. But they were kind of on a different vibe, I guess, to say the least. So what I did was I just stayed at the office even later, and I made it so that the back end did all the front end processing as well. So when it was time to present, they got up and they were displaying what should happen, but they weren't actually using the front end to do the functionality. And then, of course, people started poking holes on it. One of our managers would say, okay, well, what about this? How come this isn't working? And they were trying to skate by. And I stepped in and said, hey, I know a lot of this functionality in the front end is not necessarily working, but on the back end, we can do all of these things. And so I just got up and I started giving my presentation on the back end and saved the whole project. And I don't know how many of those people stayed at the company after I did, but I didn't stay long enough because I left, unfortunately, right before we went public. So I missed out on stock options. Again, I didn't know much about the market at the time. Oh man, I missed out on a ton of stock options.
So can let's tap into this a little bit. So you said you had to learn a new language, right? So you had been familiar with BASIC, and I'm not sure like what you were using at Morehouse, but what was the language that you were programming the back end in for the app?
Sure. So in Morehouse, we were using Pascal. Everybody knows Pascal is these semicolons. If you miss a semicolon, nothing works. But when I got to Goldman Sachs, I also learned some C in programming while I was at Morehouse as well. But when I was at Goldman Sachs, the software I had to learn was X Windows Motif. I think it's a framework, a foundation of some of the other languages that are used today, but I don't think anybody actually uses that anymore today. Mm-hmm. But it wasn't a very difficult language to learn because I had the strong foundation in the Pascal, and I understood how to do linear programming. Object-oriented was a little bit different. It was kind of new at the time, back in '97, dating myself now. but I've always been a big reader. And while I was in school, I taught myself how to program HTML, and this was just before XML was starting to get popular. But I learned how to do web programming. I would just teach myself. I would go on the internet, or I'd go to the library and get some books, and I just teach myself how certain things work. When I was in Tampa, I did a silly thing, I guess, at the time, maybe, but looking back, it was helpful. I learned assembly language. So no matter what language I was going to actually program it, I knew the underlying concepts and foundations. So everything that you build on top of, if you have a strong foundation, everything else should be fine and should work. So it was not the most challenging thing, but it did take time, as most things that I've learned in life too. If you spend the time and effort and energy, then you can have some good results.
Technologists of Color strives to provide a growth platform for African Americans in the technology industry. We help you enter the industry and nurture your career goals. Our core programs focus on connecting, informing, teaching, and collaborating. If you are looking for a community to take your career to the next level, join Technologists of Color. Find us at techsofcolor.org.
You mentioned a couple different things in there that I want to touch on. The first was that you started off with a personal interest in computers based around games. So almost every young person that I speak with is either interested in making a computer game or doing something with a robot, or their children, right? Like we come to this from fun. Like, I want to do something that's fun. I want to play a game. I want to do something that's interesting. At that age, even if there is something you want to buy, money for money's sake is not foremost in your mind. And then going to the statement that your father told you about, like, hey, if you're going to do something, make sure that it's something that you're going to be well rewarded for in doing that. And then you sought out computer science, and then the final component is, through all of that, there's not just what you took in those different programs, but you're in the library, you're reading, you're keeping up. So I guess the question there that I want to land on is that now, with as much that is going on in the world in terms of what you described before, is that there was the back end component, there was the front end component. You were using a new language, you had to learn HTML. At this point, we got databases, we got front-end design, we got back-end design, we have several different flavors of frameworks for front-end components. You have several different languages based on what it is you're trying to do. You have different paradigms. So you mentioned object-oriented programming, and then functional programming is actually older than that, but now it's very much in demand due to the way that certain things are written. Functionals kind of assumed to be the better way to go. And then they're just all these different things, and they're all going at the same time. Nothing's getting smaller, right? Like, it might be a separate thing. There might be a new tool for it, but all of a sudden that's its own different thing, right? That it becomes harder to say that I am a master of all of this that I survey, because they are discovering new lands just as you get one of them under control. So how would you say that you tackle something like that, right? In terms of keeping up, like, how do you decide what to take on, what to let go? What's your process?
Gotcha. So two things really jump out while you were describing this. And the two things I want to say are algorithms and hashtags. All right. So I remember in college, one of my advisor, Dr. Jones, he was always honest about, hey, before you write any programs, before you do any design, do anything like that, write an algorithm first. And now people talk about algorithms as this. No one was using that word, right? But this was a part of the process. You write the algorithm out, and no matter what language you use, the algorithm is the core of what needs to be done. And you can translate that algorithm into any language, right? That's not the important. The language is second, is minor, but the algorithm has to be solid first. So then you can translate that to anything. And one day, one summer when I was in New York, I was taking my nieces and nephews to the beach, And I had this idea. I was sitting in the car waiting for them to come out to jump in the car. And I grabbed just a little notepad a notepad and started writing. I wrote 7 lines of an algorithm. It wasn't code yet, but I wrote these 7 lines and I turned to them and I said, this is why I get paid the amount of money I do. And they just like, what? You get paid to do that? I was like, this is all I have to do. These little 7 lines. And the program that I needed for the next Monday, because it's the weekend, I was done with just having that algorithm, 7 lines. But when people talk about algorithms today, they're talking about their feeds, right? And what pops up on your TikTok or what pops up on your Facebook feeds. There's algorithms that people have written, complex ones, to know what do you like and what should we present to you and what are the things that you're interested in. But it's the same concept. That algorithm that someone wrote is to try and define some problem and solve that problem. The other thing with the hashtag is no one was ever using this term hashtag, but that was something we had to do with something called a hash table. It's a fast way to look up information. And people talk about their hashtags when you're tagging for tweets and things, right? So that's a common word now, but people just use the word in a specific context, but they don't necessarily know the foundation of how it all originated and what's really happening behind the scenes. What is the computer actually doing? I tell people all the time, no matter how frustrated you get with computers, how complex you think it is, it's the simplest thing in the world. It's a 0 or a 1. It's either on or off. The complexity comes in is how many zeros and ones are there? Right? If it's just a 0 and 1, that's easy, just 2 numbers. But if you have a string of them, then you can create these complex worlds and these universes and this meta and all these things. So, but if you understand the foundation, you can do, it doesn't matter the language. And that's pretty much has been my process since I had the class with Dr. Jones, is to understand the basic stuff, understand the foundation, and then build upon that. So I can learn any language. I tell people, I used to tell people, I don't say this much now, but I know like more than 10 languages, but I just don't speak them all because they're not spoken languages, right? They're coding languages. But that's part is, that's not the thing that the newer students or younger people should focus on. Get the foundations, even in sports, right? I played basketball growing up, and I had a coach, Morris Brandon, who was always drilling us the fundamentals, everything. There's always, you have to have that foundation, you're not going to be a bum, is what he told us. That was his lens. There's no bums in his program. And he encouraged us to study and be disciplined and work on the foundation, work on your layups, left hand and right hand. Don't settle for just one thing, whatever you're good at. That's it's great to be talented at something, right? But if you want to really be highly regarded, you have to work with those skills and take those talents and gifts that you have and put some effort into that as well. And those things, I've had lots of mentors over the years, and they've been giving me excellent advice, and they've carried me throughout my career. Just found the fundamentals. Always stick with the fundamentals. I'm not into showing off and that kind of thing. And I joke with my children a lot of times too. We're watching a game or something, and people start celebrating. It's like, is the game over yet? why are they celebrating? And then something happens later, and it's nice to celebrate and to be into cheer for your team, that kind of thing too. But remember that while that clock is still running, you got to still work and be disciplined and stay focused. And I just try to stay focused on the fundamentals. The programming languages, to keep up, I would say I read. I just do a lot of reading and try to stay aware of what people are working on. I don't network as much. I'm not really a big talker, but I do read often. So that's kind of how I stay abreast of what's happening. And take training classes.
That's good to know. Okay. And you take training. So I think that's good to know. I think that it doesn't really matter when you arrive on the scene, that there's always something new that hopefully you can ride the wave of, that most likely it's either what you just learned, right? Or it's just arriving. So you and a person who's been doing it for quite a while are both coming to this on somewhat of an even playing field, except for the hope is that if you've been doing it for longer, you understand more of the underlying components that can help hopefully move you along. And as you mentioned, knowing multiple languages, at a certain point, there are loops. You're iterating through something, you're branching, so it's happening or it's not happening. Understanding maybe something a little bit more complex, like recursion, or like some of those other components, and actually seeing them being used. And going from one language to another and just trying to figure out like where do they I know what should be in here, right? So like where do you
Syntax.
place it? Where do you put it?
Yes.
And that kind of carries through the more senior or the more often that you're looking at things. Because also you can kind of get kind of a little bit of a whiplash because, it's kind of like in the Wiz, today's color is green, right? And then we go a little bit long and you're getting all your green together. And then all of a sudden it's like, hey, nope, today's color is red. And it's like, I just went out and bought all this green. What are we going to do with that?
Yes.
And so because of that, if you're a new entry, you're really invested in all the marketing and it's telling you that green is the way to go. Yellow is a thing of the past, blah, 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 blah. And then you're ready. And then the next thing you know, the very next interview, people start asking you about red. And you're like, what about all this green? Right.
You learn the red, yellow, and you get the red, yellow, and blue together, and then you can make all the other colors. You can mix the red
exactly.
and the orange. You can mix the blue and yellow to get the greens, but you have to have the foundation.
Right,
get that RGB.
Right. So I think the more people hear that, the better off they'll be. I don't think that anxiety is necessarily going to go away immediately because, again, it's like the entire world is conspiring to tell you that this is the hot new thing.
Yeah.
And you have yet to recognize that there will always be a hot new thing.
Mm-hmm. In Jamaica, we have a term for that. It's called follow fashion. And my father always told me not to follow fashion. You don't just follow the hot new thing.
That's good to know. And then sometimes a hot new thing doesn't materialize. So you mentioned the role models that you've had or the mentors that you've had, like in a collegiate level. Could you speak to in your working environment, right? Like how you kind of navigate that space, because in addition to what we have to do with regard to technology, there are the components that make up work life, right? Like how to negotiate personalities, how to negotiate bureaucracy, or depending upon where you work, like the rules of the game. And I don't think you mentioned it, but in a previous conversation, you've mentioned how long you've been with Manhattan. So could you state that? And I speak to this because nowadays that's unusual.
Yes.
The tenure that you had, but also that means that you had to navigate a lot, right, over that time period of learning how that place works and then
Yes.
how you move through that effectively. So
yes. So when I joined Manhattan Associates, it was a small company. We probably had maybe about 400, maybe 500 employees at the time. And now we're well over 2,000. And so I've watched the company grow and I've been a part of helping it grow. I do recruiting as well as interviews and those kind of things. I early on, when I first joined, I was in training class, and at the end of the week of 2 weeks of training, whatever it was, everyone we were all sitting in a room, and then the managers would come in and say, okay, these people, you're going to go with this person, you're on that team, you're on this team. And then, okay, is there, anybody have any questions? And I'm sitting there like, where do I go? And my manager wasn't there, and they completely forgot that I was in the room. And I felt it was a little disturbing. Like, do I not matter? Kind of, there's a new job for me, and you don't have the decency to just tell me like, where's my manager? Like, I don't have an assignment, and I felt kind of lost. But it was a learning experience. It wasn't on purpose, right? It was just something that happened. Emergency came up, and he couldn't be there, and the person who was supposed to fill in didn't know all of the details. Everything didn't get communicated properly, and so. What I took from that is not necessarily that it's a personal thing. Not everything is personal against me, right? It's just a situation that I had to deal with and something I had to deal with professionally and honorably. And again, going back to the principles that we learned in the rites of passage, that's something that you should have some humility, right? And if you're going to correct something or correct myself, it is something that we take seriously in the rites of passage. It's the very first principle that we learn is humility. So I had to humble myself and say, okay, I understand that I'm in this situation that's not to my liking. It's not my preference. How can I make the best of it? And when I explained to them that they overlooked me, They apologized and said, okay, you can go with this person today, but your manager will be in on the next Monday. And when the manager actually did come in that next week and I got to meet him, he apologized, but we were able to build a really solid relationship, working business relationship that allowed me to grow. Right. So one of the things he would give me, not necessarily challenges, but he'd give me responsibilities that maybe somebody else may not have taken on, because he knew I was interested and I loved to learn things. And so out of that, we didn't have a lot of documentation in those early days. And so part of my job was to learn these processes and document them. And then as we were writing them, and myself and some other people were writing them, we wanted to translate them into web pages so that anyone could access it in the company. Again, the internet stuff was a little newer in that time than it is now. It's really simple now, but at that time, everything was, I knew how to program HTML and nobody else on my team did. So that became my responsibility to translate and creating. So I created one of the first sets of documentation for our company at the time. But the other manager who stepped in taught me something while we were working on that project. And I said, it's challenging to constantly to learn all these things and to translate and do all this work and everything. But it's not the most difficult thing. He was like, no, the challenge is never starting it, right? Anybody comes up with an idea and starts something, but it's the maintenance of it and to continue, like as it grows, are you willing to continue to put in that effort to make sure that it's up to date and it's accurate and it's relevant? And over time, I really began to see what he meant, because I started taking on other responsibilities, and the people who stepped in after me weren't as diligent in maintaining it. And it just came to pass that at a certain point, this was now obsolete. This technology we were using, the languages we were using to create these web pages, there were better things. There was better technology and better ways and faster ways to do it. And so either I had to learn it or somebody else was going to learn it. And so we did it together. Myself and someone else learned it together. So I could show them the pitfalls that I ran into when I was doing it originally. And then I could also explain to them why we have it structured a certain way, that I could pass on that information. And one of the big things I learned at Manhattan was early on was, don't ask the question is not always why is this something, why did this happen, or why is this broken, or why didn't this work? That's not always the most important thing. Understanding why is important, but sometimes what I found at the company at the time was there was either one of two answers. Either the person didn't work at the company anymore, or the person, it had happened so long ago they don't remember why. And so what I always had to figure out is, how can I fix it now? How can I make it better? Even I don't know all the whys as to how we got here, but I need to how can I make this better? And that experience from those two managers really propelled me going forward to constantly learn, always learn. I learn something new every single day I'm at Manhattan Associates. Every single day I learn. If I don't force myself, it happens naturally. But if it doesn't happen naturally, I'm gonna make sure I learn something every single day. Because we're here, we're alive. And you never know what you're going to need tomorrow, right? So learn everything. That's what I always tell a lot of new hires too. But in that, give yourself some grace and don't expect to know everything all the time. You're not going to know everything. Right. It takes some time to build up this knowledge and this database of information and be able to recall it when you need it. And to be kind to yourself, that you're going to make mistakes, right? This is just a part of life, but learn every day, always learning.
That's good advice, especially having the experience, right, of being somewhere and having systems change, right? And as you said, technology changes. The function that it's performing is still there, but the technology itself has changed. And then having to actually maintain that and then upgrade it, to fulfill that. And then the interesting experience that I think that a lot of people may not have, but it's a very good one to have, that goes back to your concept of like having the fundamentals or understanding the basics, is when you get to that point where you're looking through some code and you like, who wrote this? And you want to say something disparaging, and you miss the comments, and you are that person.
Yes.
right? So the you of 2 years, the you of 3 years, the you of 6 months ago
Yes.
wrote something, and the you presently is able to immediately look at it and see what's wrong with it, how it could have been done better, etc. So that the extending of grace doesn't just go to other people,
Yes.
it goes to yourself, because you were doing the best that you could at the time,
right. That's
with
right.
what you knew at
That's
the
right.
time.
Yes.
Or what was available. Because so sometimes the deadlines are not what you would have needed in order for you to accomplish what you thought would have been the best.
Yes.
The business requirement was like, hey, I don't need, the 99th percentile out of this. I need X, or at least that was the thought at the time.
Yes.
And we didn't know that we would be looking at this 5 years later going like, hey, why isn't this quicker? But it allows you to, again, extend how you feel about the work of other people. Because I often look at people who are wanted to badmouth, they get a hold of something and like, hey, why did they do this? Or that. I was like, okay, you've never been in the experience where we code reviewed your code, yes, or looked at something, and the easy way out was to say, hey, the last person, like, they really messed this up. But you can't walk in there and say that now, because you are the last person.
That's
right?
correct.
So that's really good for people to hear who based on things or not, who might have been around a while, but they have yet to have the experience where they are the person who we are talking about.
Oftentimes I get a situation where I'm working with someone who's an operator, an end user, and not necessarily a developer, and they don't necessarily have a development background. And they're like, why isn't this base code? Why isn't this base functionality? I'm like, well, it's base functionality in the laser versions, but you're on an older version and it wasn't based then. So if you want to upgrade, and as a developer, people get that kind of understanding, like you're constantly working on code and upgrading. But a lot of times end users expect everything all the time. It has to, it should already be working. So sometimes even in my designs, I try to get that mindset of what else could they want? What else could they want? But of course, you run into these deadlines and resources, and you have to find that balance.
So saying that same thing, right? Like the end user, you are in competition with whatever is available out in the consumer market that kind of got released yesterday, right? And the company that you work for is working on large scale, right? The concept of failure does not just affect a couple people who can't get onto insert consumer product for a couple of moments, but there are products being shipped around the world, and there's a lot of money and time and other things at stake. But if Facebook just released something that does X, why is that not in this product that I'm currently looking at? Also, right, new people are entering into the field all the time, either as end users or as new developers, and they have an iPhone in their hand, or they have something that integrates a lot of new technology, and like they want to put that in here now. Like, why don't we have the thing that I have in my pocket in here now? And so, you know what, like, we should scrap all this and just start over, and like, hey, we'll release it very soon, right? So how does the process of innovation work in your mind about, we have all this to maintain, we have all of these stakeholders that we need to serve, but I have both end users and newer individuals who are questioning like older processes, older things that work really well. Like, this works.
Yes.
This works, right? Like, there's nothing wrong with this. Why? Right? And as someone who's working with newer folk, it's like, this is their time to shine. Let's just do this over. Like, hey, this is a good idea. Let's scrap all this. Let's make this work. I don't care that this has been around for 25 years and there's nothing wrong with it. I don't like the color scheme. Why don't, and then sometimes they have legitimate concerns, right? And also sometimes to your point, like maybe there's been a paradigm shift, right? Yes. Like it works, but it doesn't work the way I think it works. And that's kind of slowing down the usability because I expect it, again, like I'm using Amazon, I'm using Facebook, I'm using so-and-so. So the way that I envision this working is not, and we never want to have to train users, right? So how does one deal with that in regards to how innovation is moving?
Sure. Everything you just touched on is the continuous part of being an employee at Manhattan Associates. We've had situations where we've had to rewrite code. We've had situations in years past where we say, you know what, we have this product, but we're gonna write a new product. We've done all those things. We've had situations where documentation may not be as robust as it needs to be. It doesn't explain every little detail, but the key to all of those things is first you have to have people. You have to have the right people in the room that make the tough calls and make the tough decisions, but make the wise decisions. And you have to have a lot of collaboration between many different groups. It's not just the end user alone. It's not just the developer alone, right? But the manager has some input, and then the operations has input. The people that in IT have input. That you talked about the time frame to get things done. So there are times when we're working on projects that involve conveyor systems, and when if a box goes past the scanner and there's a label supposed to come out 2 seconds later, but your box has gone past and it's been 4 seconds, that box misses the label, it's going to get diverted. There's a whole problem now at this point, because now there's these exceptions and you have to have a lot of processes for the exceptions. But the key, you definitely have to understand the processes that you want. Define the processes, right? Define them as granularly as possible to get as much detail as possible, and also keep in mind the amount of time that you have and the resources you have. If you can't design, so we had this saying on our team that our warehouse management product could fly the space shuttle with a modification, right? And that's kind of like a guiding light for us whenever we're doing design. Like, we can go to the ends of the earth and beyond if we have enough time and money to do it and resources, but you may not need software to fly a space shuttle. You just need something to make sure that label gets printed in 2 seconds. And so we have to take into consideration what languages we're going to use, what interfaces they're going to do, what's the protocols. So the communication is key between the computers as well as the people involved, and then collaborating across groups, and being realistic, right? So there are times when your client wants something and they think they have to have it, but you can discuss it with them and understand truly what is the requirement and what's a nice to have. And then you can work from there. Like, okay, here's your core requirements. We can get this done in X amount of time for X amount of money. These other nice to haves, we can get them on, but it's going to take more effort. It may take more time. You may not need it right away for go live. So you have to be able to make those tough decisions and draw those lines and keep the client happy as well. But that's all of our projects. We have to go through that type of process. Define the process, and then and collaborate within the groups and people. Yeah.
So I would be remiss if, I know we spoke around it, but if I didn't kind of get you to speak to the individuals who are watching of what Manhattan Associates does, right?
Yes.
From a tech standpoint, how would you describe the products you make or the services that you provide?
Sure. I'm not a salesman. Let me start there. But Manhattan Associates is an excellent company. It's been such a wonderful experience for me to work at Manhattan. Like I said, I learn every day. What we do, I'd say we're a solutions company, right? We provide solutions. We develop software for the warehouse logistics supply chain space. We are an international company. We have offices in several countries. People speak many languages. If you go into a mall, there's a very, very high probability that whatever store you walk in is a client of ours. You won't see commercials. I mean, I had been at the company maybe 10, 15 years before someone finally said, hey, we have an ad in the Wall Street Journal. And it was like our first ad ever kind of thing. We just don't, all of our advertising, can I say, is word of mouth mostly, but within the industry, like the clients will speak so highly about us that, and when you go to conferences and things, oh, you use the Manhattan software? Yeah, we use it for this. And they're like, well, oh, we didn't know we could do it use it in that manner. And then, they talk and then they come back to us and say, hey, how come we're not getting these kind of things? And, it just goes like that. And that's how a lot of the growth has happened. Just delivering quality products and also giving excellent service. Like we don't sit on bad news. If something's not going to work, we're going to let you know up front and we're going to walk with you to fix it. But also we don't have all these little inside jokes and things, but we get questions for other people's software. Like we didn't develop this. It has nothing to do with our company, but you're using it and you're having an issue with it and you call us and we'll help you fix it. We solve problems. That's what we do at our core. And we do it very well. And we've done it very well for 20 something years now, 26, I think it's about 26 years now, something like 27.
All right. Thank you for that. That helps kind of let people understand the scope of the technology that you're working with, the largesse, like it's around the world, it's in your favorite eatery, it's in your favorite retailer, and that so Manhattan is a place that's solving really interesting problems in the event that they are looking towards that for employment, and that you've been able to stay there for quite a long time and have enjoyed the ride. So one of the questions I would ask is, as a person of color, as a Black man in the industry, the statistic right now is that we are about 4% of the individuals in technology, and that the average time span is around 5 years. And you've been able to well surpass that. And we've talked about the elements that have helped you do that. Are there any sets of advice or nuggets, right, that you would specifically pass on to have someone who is not just necessarily in the beginning of their career, but maybe someone who's a mid-level of their career, about how they would navigate to move forward, to make it, to be in the industry, not necessarily the same employer, but in the industry for this amount of time?
Absolutely. The thing that comes to mind, the front of my mind, is discipline. We have a definition in our rites of passage. Discipline is one's ability to start, continue, and complete any task over a specified period of time and with a good disposition. And that last part is so key. Right? You can start stuff, you can continue, you can finish all these things, but if your disposition is poor, nobody's going to want to work with you. Nobody's going to want to even take a chance on you or on what you have to offer. But doing things consistently over throughout time, whether you want to do it or not, if you know it's important, and sticking with it, and being disciplined and having a great disposition along with it, you can do just about anything. People will look for you because they see that you're willing to do the work and you're having fun doing it, or you're not causing more issues within, no drama and all those kind of things. But if you're doing it with a good disposition, people gravitate towards that. Even if it's not necessarily something that they have a huge interest in, they see how much you're invested in it, and they're willing to work with you on that. My wife was telling some of her students last week about auditioning, and she was saying that you're not necessarily just auditioning for that specific role, right? But you're auditioning so that the people that are conducting the interviews and auditions, they remember you for the role that's really for you, right? So you can't just go into it with a small mindset that I'm going to get this one job, right? It's a career kind of thing, like you said. And the way that you have a successful career, in my opinion, is to do things consistently and to do them with a great disposition. Whether you, again, like you said, it may be at the same company or at a different company. And no matter what company you're at, whatever industry you're in, it's much smaller and much tighter than you think. Like everyone knows everyone somehow, some way. Especially now with all the social media and things, you can get to access somebody in an instant, a couple of clicks of a button. But when you have a good disposition, hopefully I can't think of too many people out there in the world who can say that I was mean to them, or I was unkind, or I wasn't helpful. One of the things I'm really, really big on is if someone comes to me with a question, I'm going to stop what I'm doing. What I'm doing is important, but what you're asking is important as well. And if you're stuck and I can help get you unstuck and get you moving forward, then that's a win for me. And then I'll figure out my stuff afterwards. But I'm always willing to help other people. And that's been, I think, those kind of things that I just mentioned, being disciplined and having a good disposition and being willing to help others, even although I may have to sacrifice a little bit more of my time and stay a little later. Those are the things I think that have kept me at Manhattan Associates. People have given me opportunities and I've taken full advantage of them when I could.
Thank you for your time. And thank you for speaking with all of us. And enjoy your day.
Thank you, too.
If you enjoyed this content and want more like it, join our community. Visit technologiesofcolor.org and select newsletter from the menu. We keep you in the know about in-person and virtual events intended to help you achieve your technology career goals.